Hello and welcome to Movie Marathon Mood. It's the show where we watch a bunch of movies and then we talk about them. It's as simple as that. On this episode, we finally enter the Daniel Craig era in our James Bond marathon. But before we do, we go back to the 1960s and talk about the first adaptation of Casino Royale before we get to Craig's Casino Royale and then what I call Casino Royale 1.5, Quantum of Solace. We talk about it all right here on Movie Marathon Mood. Stick around.
Casino Royale is too much for one James Bond. Peter Sellers is James Bond.
These are my credentials.
Ursula Andress is James Bond. David Niven is James Bond. Woody Allen is James Bond.
My doctor says I can't have bullets enter my body at any time. What if I said I was pregnant?
Oh, you like that sort of thing, eh?
Hi, everybody. Jesse Ghostrap here, joined by my pal, comrade Drew Cordell. Hi, Drew.
Jesse, got a interesting episode this week.
I think that says the least, you know. Like we've had obviously different types of episodes, different mix bags, interesting combinations of movies, and this has to be the most disparate of any one that I think we've done. And part of that, I mean, there's many reasons for that, but part of that is because we're going to start in 1967, and then we're going to jump all the way to 2006,
Right.
right after. Uh, so a part of that is timeline, and obviously that's not all the reason why. But yeah, we're going to start off with Casino Royale before we go off to Casino Royale, and end with Casino Royale 1.5.
Right.
But 1967, Casino Royale. What in the world, you know? It is such an interesting thing because, like, if you think about, obviously already did one other non-official Bond movie, and that's the only other non-official Bond movie. It's a true feature film, at least, that exists. Never Say Never Again. Um, there's only two non-official Bond movies that are out there in the world in that sense. Um, Obviously, plenty of other parody movies
Right.
that are inspired by Bond, but only two non-official films out there like that. And this one is, you know, like you have people that own the rights to Casino Royale, the first book that Ian Fleming wrote with James Bond as a character. They had these rights, and the James Bond series became a huge thing.
Right.
So they knew that they could make a movie of it, but instead of like Never Say Never Again, they didn't look at themselves as competition. They didn't really want to compete with what exactly Bond was doing, at least. And they thought, let's make a parody version. I guess. At least that's what they said they were going to do. I'm trying to think about how to start even talking about this version of Casino Royale because it is definitely, like, I don't think it's a mistake to say it's a comedy film.
Right.
For the most part, like it's very much trying to be a comedy film, but it's not exactly parody
No.
either. I mean, it is and it isn't. There are things that they're obviously parodying. Like for instance, David Niven is kind of the main James Bond here.
Right.
Before they come up with the plan of every agent's now going to be called 007 James Bond.
Right.
So before they do that, like he is James Bond, and he's not exactly the suave character that we've come to know,
Right.
and he's kind of intimidated by the ladies, has a speech impediment, you know, like he's a nervous little wreck in many ways. So obviously that's a parody kind of trait.
Right.
but so much of the movie is just wacky in the sense of being wacky,
Yes.
or sometimes just telling the story in a kind of straight way.
Right.
Like it's a fascinating mixture of things, and a like, well, before we even really get deep into it, I wanted to I don't know, kind of think about the people that are involved in the movie. Like, let me start off like on a random note. Social Network, whenever that movie came out, I was looking at like the people involved. David Fincher is one of my favorite filmmakers. Aaron Sorkin is one of my favorite writers. Uh, Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross doing the score. Before that movie ever came out, I was thinking, what in the world? Like, this movie sounds fantastic. You got all these top people, but I also didn't know what the movie was going to look like, because what is a David Fincher directed Sorkin script? Like, what does that look like?
Right.
That sounds like they're tonally apart in a way, and yet it's one of my top favorite Fincher movies. It manages to do that hat trick. You look at the people, some of the people involved in Casino Royale, and like, I absolutely love Peter Sellers. Um, I've enjoyed David Niven in a number of things. Has Orson Welles, for Pete's sake. Orson Welles playing Lashif, main villain. It has Woody Allen.
Right.
On and on the cast goes. Holy cow! Like, look at all these
Right.
people, and it has John Huston as one of the directors. And John Huston is a legend, absolute legend filmmaker. And I think you start to point to one of the problems with the movie when you say one of the movie's directors. He's only a director on certain sequences.
Right.
But what an interesting combination of people doing a James Bond story, doing Casino Royale. That could be really cool. And then even if you're saying they're doing a parody, those people could do a really splendid parody film. They're very capable performers, capable people, and yet here's this movie,
Right.
and it's a big fat mess. It is such a mess. Like, and like I said, John Huston's only one of the movie's directors. They had multiple directors just for certain sequences. Just as for instance, Peter Sellers and Orson Welles did not get along at all,
No.
so they shot their scenes separately. Like, so many different behind the scenes drama, and way too many people that are even involved in the film's making. And like, there are examples of movies that have all types of people making it that still work out. This is not one of them.
Right.
It is such a huge mess, and I am grateful in so many ways that we started this episode with this movie, because then we could jump straight from this Casino Royale to the other one.
Right.
And at the same time, it's so bizarre to see how differently the story's handled. And it's not like this version sticks strictly to the story from Fleming's novel either.
Right.
It's all over the place. But there are some of the same elements, and it's funny to see how differently each movie handles them.
Yeah.
Uh, One of my favorite things, though, is Orson Welles in this movie. As Lashif,
Yeah.
just because, like, he comes into the movie, and they've already been hinting at him, and it's certainly not as great as the Third Man, whenever his character's hinted at and then finally appears in the shadows in one of the most legendary movie moments in history.
Right.
But at the same time, it's cool to see Wells kind of pop up and, for whatever reason, doing magic. just because Wells himself liked doing magic, I guess. But at the same time, like, why not? That could work, if especially if that was like integrated into the movie more. That version of the character could really sell. You know, you could really buy into it, and it could be really cool. And instead, it feels like something like we just changed pace again. Speaking of changing pace, how about all the sped up footage in this movie? Uh, like, because that's how you do comedy, right? Isn't that funny when you just speed up the footage? It happens multiple times in here. And the thing that's supposed to be funny is that it's fast. One of my favorite things is when they're like opening up different doors and you see this room of women that are fight training, and it's and it's just, but all they're doing is fight training. There's nothing funny happening. The concept itself isn't especially funny, but it's sped up footage
Right.
with the high pitched audio as well. Golly, this movie's weird. And I remember it being weird too. It's just been so long since I'd seen it that it was interesting to have a refresher on just how odd this movie is, uh, and how frustrating it is too. Because you have people like Peter Sellers and Woody Allen who are very capable comic performers, not given anything funny to do.
Right.
What is happening in this movie, Drew?
I mean, that's something I still don't know. Um, this is my second time seeing it. And like you, it was a long time. I think I watched it when I was maybe in middle school, out of like curiosity because it was on TV and my dad knew about it and told me that it was, that it was a different type of James Bond movie, that it wasn't the part of the main series. Explained that to me. We watched it together. I kind of sat in complete, not awe, just shock, I suppose. Just like, what is this? What is this? I can't even. The frustrating thing is, I can't even really call it garbage because because Die Another Day, that's garbage.
Right, 100%.
This
Yeah.
is just. This is weird. Yeah, weird is the best. Like, it's bizarre because there's some great ideas. I'll even go so far to say great ideas. And there's just like strokes of inspiration in the casting and some of the things, and then it's just all thrown at the wall, and it makes this weird mural of splatter. Is the best way to describe it, I think. It's not. I mean, it literally explodes in your face.
Well, like, let's start at this point though. Like, why is James Bond in this version brought out of retirement to be a consultant? Why even make that decision?
Right,
That's a strange decision in and of itself, like, and I don't really understand it. Like,
right,
was that decision supposed to be funny? I really have no idea. Uh, I don't understand why they're doing that, and that they're also protecting their agents by them all being Bond, or protecting him by their all being Bond, and I don't understand that either.
right.
I don't want to jump too far ahead, but think about like the 2006 Bond, and he's a new Bond. He's a fresh 007,
Yeah,
and it's a big decision for him to actually go by James Bond,
right.
use his real name.
Yeah,
And in this version, it's a gag that everybody's James Bond,
James Bond, Jimmy Bond. Um,
Jimmy Bond. Yes.
it's yeah. I I was reading up on it after I watched it, and you already mentioned that Peter Sellers and Orson Welles didn't get along.
Right.
Well, I think part of the reason why the Niven is kind of bookended like he is that like he's very prominent at the beginning, and then really, I mean, he's in it, but he's really not really prominent again until the end. Uh, and that is that they intended Peter Sellers. I don't know about the original script, but his character was going to obviously be the main focus of the film, and he didn't appear for several scenes uh, at all, uh, and just left production at a certain point that they had to uh, ultimately, and it does feel this way, so I'll take it as a truth that they basically, I don't know if they didn't intend the David Niven Bond to be in it to begin with or not, but they definitely bookended him because of that. Um, so it kind of makes sense when you're looking at it from why it's there, but not how it makes sense to the story. Uh, because the story, I mean, nothing really makes sense, which is just crazy. I mean, I don't know if I can really, I don't know if this movie is really reviewable. I think it's uh, it's an experience. I feel like anybody listening to this is going to be probably the one most likely to have not been seen, um, or one of them. And I'm going to recommend that if you are a fan of Bond, that I do think you need to see it,
Yeah.
just out of curiosity. But it's because it's just crazy. It's a crazy film, and you got to think, just to touch on the parody aspect. Like this came out the same year as You Only Live Twice, so up to that point, Bond hadn't been really it hadn't gotten off the rails, hadn't gone bonkers, um, with anything too much. Thunderball, of course, was the worst, one of the worst Bond movies, but in our opinion, but it's not the opinion of a lot of people. And
Well, at the time, it was a huge hit, so it
yeah, so it was kind of weird to have this crazy movie do crazy things that the Bond series would. I mean, I'm not going to say that they did the same things, but they would incorporate some of the crazy ideas. I don't know if it was intentional, but some things were mirrored later on, and then especially when you look at Austin Powers, uh, the the
right.
the '90s parody. Um, you know, it takes almost as much, if not more, inspiration from Casino Royale than it does uh, some of the other Bond films. And it's for good, Neil. There's a lot of funny things here. And then, like you said, there's a lot of stuff that I guess is supposed to be funny, but it's just like, sped up. Like the lion, it's right out the gate, like the lions at the at Bond's mansion. Like these lions are just, just hanging out, and M and a bunch of other people are like riding in a car, and then we speed up a lion jumping on top of the car driving down the road. Like, okay, you know, and then just eh, like, and then the next scene you have like an army blow up Bond's mansion. They just show up and start mortar shelling it. You know you're in for just a really strange ride. I feel like the whole I think my favorite part of the movie, which it's kind of weird to say about this movie that I have a favorite part, but I actually really enjoyed David Niven at M's house, like trying to, uh, he's kind of unbeknownst to him, Smersh has infiltrated M's family and um, his widow and all the daughters and women there are trying to seduce him. And like you said, he's not the suave debonair Bond we've come to know. I really like. It's really weird, and it's like I don't know if it's comedy, but I kind of enjoy it. It's so awkward and bizarre, but it's like it's it's so 60s. It really cracks me up. Like I almost wish that was the whole movie. Like like but there are things in it like just the fact that Orson Welles is Le Chiffre,
Yep.
and you have Ursula Andress, Honey Rider is in this as as Vesper Lind, and who we will talk quite a bit more about in the next version of Casino Royale. And there, I think that I really enjoy Peter Sellers in this too. It's just like it's all disjointed. You can tell it's a movie that is more pieces than a big picture. It's just a bunch of things thrown together. They're sort of related, but not really. They're crammed together in an insane finale that makes absolutely zero sense with cowboys, Indians.
Like, what is the joke, right? When you
Right.
have these random things, like, is the joke just that it's random?
Like it I couldn't, Blazing Saddles has a similar ending. I mean, not really, but in some ways, and it's actually comedy. And then you see it
Yeah.
in the all the crazy stuff that happens at the end of this, and you're like, what?
Well, but the difference is, I mean, not that it needs explanation, but the end of Blazing Saddles is breaking the fourth wall and saying, you know now that you're inside of a movie.
Right, exactly.
And the movie knows that it's a movie, is outwardly acknowledging that it's a movie, and it's having a gas with bringing in all these different pieces and the Hollywood sets. But Casino Royale never does that hard.
No.
It seems to be trying to tell a story, kind of.
Yeah, and it doesn't know it doesn't know what it's doing. That's the other thing. Yeah, like you said, there are at least five. It was at five credited directors or six. No, it was a handful.
Something like
And
that.
then and
Yeah.
then I was reading that Sellers and Woody Allen and a couple of other people, took creative control behind the scenes and weren't credited. Did it uncredited. So of certain sequences. So you have hands in this all over the place, and it's very evident. It's like a million different movies in one. And that's why I say this is really hard to review. It's really hard to rate.
Well, think about the production design on this movie,
Yeah,
too. There's some neat production design on this movie. It's worth saying that the budget for this film was slightly higher than that of You Only Live Twice.
right.
And, You Only Live Twice was a huge movie. Uh, and this one cost a little bit more, ended up making about half as much, but still a success.
Right.
This movie was a success. It just wasn't. It wasn't the success of the Bond series to that point
Yeah.
and at that point, but it was still a successful movie. I can't even imagine being an audience member in '67 and sitting through this and walking away with whatever opinion,
I think since, I guess we have to rate it. I feel like this one would get a 003 from me. Just it's a mess. I mean, it's just crazy. I it's not coherent, but I can't really give it lower than that because there are some, I'm not going to say strokes of genius, but there's some little, little inklings that this could have been something, really special. I really wish there had been like a singular mindset in making it, and that, that Sellers and Orson Welles maybe could have had, more scenes that they were actually in together. Uh, but obviously that was not going to happen. Um, this is just a weird, it's a weird movie, and like I said, I'm going to insist that if you have not seen it, despite my rating, uh, I'm going to insist that you watch it because just because I don't rate it high doesn't mean that you might find something that you might appreciate that I didn't. But it's just it's crazy. It's a crazy experience. I feel like if you're a Bond fan and you haven't seen it, I'm not really saying you're missing out, but it's something to behold, to say the least.
Well, I'm right on the precipice of being in the exact same opinion of you, but I'm gonna give it a 004,
All right.
and it's it, it's close. Like I don't exactly know where to give it a rating for sure
Right.
because it is so messy, and yet at the same time, like this doesn't feel in a way like a reason to rate a movie highly, and not that that's a high rating.
Right.
It's fascinating to watch. Like just the experience of watching it is fascinating, and I don't know what's happening most of the time, and I can't call it precisely good.
Right.
It doesn't even know what it's doing, but it's so weird that I kind of enjoy watching it, and that's I guess why I would give it just a slight push to 004 instead of 003. Um, I mean, I keep stumbling just trying to think of what to even say about the movie in so many ways. Because obviously, I mean, you hinted at it. I think one of the reasons it's so problematic is because of the production problems and issues they had with Peter Sellers in particular, and that's apparent, and it's uh, a big hindrance, and it's frustrating for so many reasons. But uh, they could have gotten rid of him or done something better, like because what they did instead is has no singular vision whatsoever. Like, why are there so many people
Right.
credited all over this film as having strong creative input? Like, of course that's not going to work. You have too many things happening. It's all over but like I don't think we can move ahead without mentioning Burt Bacharach.
Right.
His score is one of the catchiest scores I've heard in a long time, and it's stuck in my head. and Oscar nominated song that came from this movie, which is another interesting factoid when it comes to like thinking about how singular the Bond movies are for having a song. And
Right.
here's one that was Oscar nominated from a parody from or so-called parody film.
Right. And interestingly, I was kind of in the same boat with you as far as the music is surprisingly catchy, and I enjoyed it for what it is, but it's also bizarre and out of place for the story, but the movie itself, it's a perfect fit for just it's a perfect match for the absolute insanity that is this movie.
What's one of the few things that's immediately telling you what the tone is supposed to be.
Right. Oh, this is a frivolous comedy, and and then and then it starts. Uh, Apparently, the recording of the album was highly regarded amongst the music critics and artists, and I think that's really funny, kind of hilarious that like this really offbeat soundtrack to this weird ass movie was like a golden standard for recording music for a while. Um, it's just the weird thing. Like, there's so many weird little things about this movie, but like that just the cherry on top. That's just so bizarre to me. But I do enjoy the music. I think it's hilarious. It's hilarious that it's in a sense James Bond music, but not not in the sense that we're used to at all. Imagine if they had actually had a successful film successful enough that they someone demanded a sequel to that. And we all of a sudden got these Burt Bacharach of blistering soundtracks for every new terrible Bond parody that came out.
See, I think that would be a wonderful world. I think one of the only reasons I gave it a 004 is because I'm really kind of stuck in the middle, like a 003 and a half, and I rounded up.
Yeah, yeah. I see. I rounded down. I was probably in the same boat, and I rounded down. So that's fair enough.
Again, before we skip ahead, I do think it's uh, worth kind of briefly touching on the history of like some of the Bond movies that are comedy films. That aren't Bond films. They're just they are obviously parodies that very much touch in that vein. Uh, you mentioned Austin Powers already, which was such a huge hit in its own right, and weirdly like not a hit from the get go in the first movie, but then a hit on home video, and then got two bigger sequels as a result. But point is, like, it became a cultural touchstone in its own right.
Right.
And obviously Bond, but people could also just watch Austin Powers to itself and never watch Bond, and it works on its own. And that's an interesting thing. Then you have Johnny English, Rowan Atkinson actually having been in a Bond movie, as we mentioned previously. I was curious if you'd ever seen, because I think there's two Johnny English movies. Have you ever seen OSS 117? There's uh, two of those. Cairo Nest of Spies being one of them.
I have not.
And then there's Lost in Rio. That's from 2006 and 2009. So one of the reasons to bring it up is that Cairo Nest of Spies came out the same year as Casino Royale did, 2006. I guess technically you'd have to call Casino Royale a remake.
Right.
Technically, it's a remake uh, of the story, even though there's not much of a story in the '67 film. But yeah, 2006 they had this movie OSS 117, Cairo Nest of Spies, and it's Jean Dujardin, who is from. Do you ever see The Artist that won Best Picture?
Yes. Yes.
And he's in that, and the same filmmaker, the same people there that made The Artist. They made this James Bond parody film,
Huh.
and it's really fun. It's really cool, and it looks like a 1960s movie. That's what it's made to look like. Uh, Worth checking out. I strongly recommend it. Who knows? Maybe we'll watch these movies sometime and talk about it on here. But nonetheless, worth mentioning when we're just talking about comedic spins on Bond. And I think it's a cool throwback movie to make something in 2006 that looks like it's from the 1960s and is a parody of that style. It's really cool and better than Casino Royale is at being a parody movie.
Right.
Because pretty much all of those movies that I mentioned just now are better at being parodies than Casino Royale. Because what, and this is the thing too, like, not only does it not have a singular vision, and not only is it not concrete, but it's also um, taking on something that already has a wink in it.
Right.
Like the Bond series isn't exactly breaking down the fourth wall, but it knows what it is, and it's kind of a fantasy spy movie. At least a lot of them are.
Right.
Uh, have that kind of winking edge to them, especially in that early era. Not that there's no seriousness, but there's definitely a wink too.
Right.
So what exactly are they trying to parody? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know even what they're trying to do, but there it is. Uh, One of the things that I mentioned back in From Russia with Love is a lot of Alfred Hitchcock influence, kind of a harder edge at times, and this notion of violence that actually has a threat to it. Like killing somebody is tough. That's something that Hitchcock was very
Right.
big on. Was like it's not like it just goes down easily. Like you're gonna strangle somebody to death. It's gonna take some real effort, and it's gonna be bloody and nasty. And the person's not just gonna die immediately or easily, and it's gonna leave an impact on you and your soul. That's something that you could see in a Hitchcock movie.
Right.
That's something that comes back to the series in a vengeance in 2006 with Casino Royale.
The man was Le Chiffre, private banker to the world's terrorists, which would explain how he could set up a high-stakes poker game at Casino Royale in Montenegro. If he loses this game, he'll have nowhere to run.
I will be keeping my eye on our government's money and off your perfectly formed house.
You noticed. Whatever is left of me. Whatever I am. I'm yours.
The only question remains. Will you yield? In time?
Hopefully that sharp turn just worked when we were jumping into talking about our next movie. Point is, like, what a way to like reboot things in a new era. Obviously Die Another Day came out a year after 9/11, but there's a lot of influence in this era of post 9/11 films that have a harder edge. You're talking about The Age of Jack Bauer, um, talking about the Bourne Identity series.
Right.
You're talking about the year before Casino Royale, Batman Begins, which is why I've often called Casino Royale Bond Begins,
Yes.
because it's essentially what it is, and in so many ways, they looked at this as a way to regenerate things, but also to do the Bond formula, but kind of find the Bond formula all over again by showing a James Bond who's brand new and the series isn't quite at the point that it would be later on in the Daniel Craig era alone. Like, I think a lot of the Daniel Craig era is priminess for Bond the way we've known him, the way that Bond had been. It's all building up to that, and so it's going to be fun as we kind of go into these movies. I'm looking at Bond becoming Bond in a way, and right out of the gate, Casino Royale announces itself as this harder edge thing with the stark black and white opening sequence. And I had to tell you, Drew, like when this movie started, and I was already excited about it. We get through that opening scene, and it has that shot at the camera that is the most unique one in the entire series,
Oh yeah.
because it's not quite the shot through the barrel that you normally have, but it's a unique spin on it.
Right.
It's a really cool way to start, and then Chris Cornell's song kicks in. I got chills.
Yes. Right.
I got absolute chills watching it, and I got so excited that I was watching Casino Royale.
It definitely grabs you right off the bat with that kind of breadth of intensity that it has. And it should be noted that this is the return of Martin Campbell, who directed Goldeneye, a film that is often highly regarded by Bond fans, and he returned uh, in a big way and made and as I love Goldeneye, but this is he made a much better movie here with Casino Royale. Casino Royale, I'm just gonna uh, come out and say it is my favorite Bond film. Period. Uh, I I used to kind of argue that maybe there was another one, but no. Casino Royale is my favorite, and this viewing just cemented that even further. And I think, without kind of going point by point, I want to touch on something that you said in that, this is kind of the Bond formula. A lot of people miss the boat, I think, when this first came out and tried this. There were a lot of comparisons to the Bourne movies when Daniel Craig returned, or no, not returned, when he started. They make a little more sense with Quantum of Solace, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I never really understood why people, other than just the tone, but I never understood that with this movie, and it's because even though the edge of this movie is undeniable, it's still Bond. There are those trimmings. There are those, the David Arnold. David Arnold has never sound. I mean, he's been good so far, but he just comes out completely confident. You talk about how awesome that Chris Cornell song is. You Know My Name. It's one of the best, in my opinion, one of the best Bond songs. Um, David Arnold's use of that in the music, in the theme, motif, and everything, just from that opening parkour chase after the little introduction of Lashif, where Bond's chasing this bomb maker, just grabs you. I mean, it feels like Bond to me. It feels, it has the all the trappings. It has the production quality, the great shots, the great good camera work, the amazing, absolutely amazing stunt work. This is one of the best sequences that I've ever seen. I mean, really, it's a great action sequence. It's fantastic. And I think a lot of people forget, uh, it's always, there are always jokes made about all the intense poker scenes, which they actually are intense, but let's disregard that for now. The people are like, oh, the card playing movie. Casino Royale is like action packed for about the first 45 minutes or an hour. Just action sequence after action sequence. It is good stuff. And Bond isn't quite the Bond that, as you mentioned, that he's not quite the Bond that we know yet, but he's still Bond. And that kind of wit and sense of danger that we've seen before is amplified here. It's a little more unrefined, and I like that. I think the idea that this Bond is not really like the character is unfounded. This is very much a Bond film through and through, and I think that's why I love it so much. It makes him an actual character. Not that he hasn't been before, but here we've never really had the opportunity to see him grow in some of these other movies. And there have been attempts, and there have been some good attempts. I mean, we talked about on Her Majesty's Secret Service. We talked about some other films that have gone for that kind of feeling, but I don't think any of them accomplish what this one accomplishes. Between his relationship with Vesper, which is tragic and kind of creates the coldness. He already has it to a degree, but it creates this cold, untrusting side that we get in that we're supposed to kind of accept is part of who Bond is. But I think we see that he struggles with that even after the things that happen to him in subsequent films. So I can't. Again, this one, I knew it was going to be hard for me not to gush about this one. Um, so I apologize. Um, but I knew going in that, I mean, unless something crazy happened, because it had been a few years since I've seen it. I've seen this one a lot. Um, but I mean, I knew how I felt about it, and I knew how I was going to feel about it this time, and it gets better every time I see it. And like whether it's Lashif played by Mads Mikkelsen, who just does an outstanding job, and the way he's written, his acting. This is one of the, if not the best. This is one of the best acted Bond movies. They have so many great performances in this. I mean, of course, from Daniel Craig, uh, who might be, you know, as far as acting, may give the best Bond performance here in this movie. Eva Green as Vesper Lynn is wonderful. Judi Dench is M again, but it's almost like she's playing a different version. So in a sense, she is. We rebooted in 1995. She sang that Bond's a sexist, misogynist dinosaur, relic of the Cold War. In this one, she's lamenting that Bond didn't defect and is wondering what to do with him. And says, "God, I miss the Cold War." So it's almost a different character, but in a sense, she perfected what she they you mentioned Wade and Purvis had started writing in World Is Not Enough, and unfortunately they did die another day as well. But here I think they you know got back to what they were trying to do with World Is Not Enough, which is make M a more a more believable character and someone connected to Bond, and they do it fantastically. And of course, this run with Judy Dench as M is great, and it only gets better. I could go on and on and on. Felix Slider, Jeffrey Wright is wonderful. There's so many great scenes.
Look, I'll stop you there randomly, just because mentioning Jeffrey Wright as Felix Leiter, there's never been a Felix Leiter that mattered in a way that this one does.
Right, I agree with that completely.
Like he's always been a character. He's always been like, oh yeah, the friend from the CIA, that kind of thing.
Right,
But this guy's actually involved in the story. He's actually a character, and he's played by Jeffrey friggin' Wright.
right,
Like,
right.
come on. Jeffrey Wright is incredible, and he's an excellent character involved in the storyline here.
Yeah, absolutely. His his delivery of lines is wonderful too. He's very cool. This Felix Leiter is has very cool style to him, and uh, I remember seeing it for the first time and not knowing. I hadn't read Casino Royale at that time. Unfortunately, my most of my knowledge came from the aforementioned 67 movie, but I knew that that was not representative of what the book was. Um, but I didn't know Leiter was going to be in this movie. Um, so I was like thrilled when it turned out that he was Felix Leiter, because that was such a cool reveal. It was such a cool line, a brother from Langley. Just the intensity in those. Let's talk about that. Just the emotions and intensity in the gambling scenes. Uh, the stakes, they're so high for the character of Bond. If he loses all this money that Lashif's trying to win back to cover up for the terrorist attack that was foiled, that he backed. Bond's going to essentially make the British government pay for terrorism. But if he wins, he takes this guy out of the game. Those are some great stakes, and they make them work in that Hitchcockian way you're talking about. Some of the most intense scenes in that movie don't have anything to do with a weapon or action. It's just the suspense or the tension between characters while, you we wait for cards to be revealed. It's just, I haven't seen a lot of movies that do what this does successfully. And and this does it not only successfully, it does it, I think, maybe the best way it can be done.
Well, and it's not just that. Obviously, like on one hand, there's just the game itself,
Right,
and that's the thing when people will write it off as like, how can card playing be exciting? Well, on one hand, like, sure, yeah, the game itself exists and it's part of the structure of it, but there's also the plot
right,
element that you were talking about, uh, that is important. Like you can't skip over that. It's not like they stopped the plot to play cards.
right,
It's actually the winnings are going to play a role in the stakes of the world, right?
right,
It's actually something to be interested in. Furthermore, it's interesting because you are aware of the characters. You're aware of what it means for Bond, who's trying to prove himself as an agent, and not lose the money of Vesper, and he's playing this game of not getting too ahead of his ego too,
Right.
which is a fascinating dynamic. He's not just some super agent; he's actually having to prove himself as a person and as someone with wit, and keep his head on the shoulder. Uh, and on top of that, there's Lashif, who is not the top dog
Right.
and has to prove himself too, and they're trying to undermine him. And so, like, that's a big part of what makes all the poker scenes work, is because you're aware of the dynamics of the people. It's actually interesting in that way. It would be a huge disservice to say that it's just watching poker. you know
Right.
you're actually invested in the dynamics of it, and on top of that, there's a lot more that's happening in between scenes.
Right.
There's action that happens in between the poker scenes,
Yes. Yeah.
like when Lashif is attacked for his money, and then you have uh, Bond poisoned and having to start his own, or attempt to start his own heart before Vesper comes out there.
Right.
Uh, and that's some intense thriller stuff happening, and it keeps up the same energy that the first part of the movie had, which is important because the first stretch of the movie, as you mentioned, is like action scene, action scene, action scene, and they're big moments. Some big sweeping shots of epic action, uh, and then you get to the section of the movie that is much more tightly formed, and the same energy is present,
Right.
and that's quite a hat trick, really.
Yeah.
Uh, that's a huge hat trick to make the drama as fascinating as just the action sequences themselves. No, we could break down so many different parts of this movie. Um, uh, you already mentioned like Judi Dench, and how terrific she is as Ilm, how terrific she has been as Ilm, and why wouldn't you stick with her as Ilm? There's no reason they should, like, hey, we're rebooting things.
Right.
Let's keep Judy. Let's keep the Dame,
Yeah.
because why in the world would you not? Uh, Mads Mikkelsen is the man. I love so many roles that he's in. I love him as Hannibal. It's another of my favorite things, and he's terrific in plenty of other films. But he's a great Lashif who is intimidating, but he's also like a real person who you can tell has his own nervousness,
Right.
and that is terrific. That how could he not be one of the best, at least one of the best villains in the entire series? He's in a running if we were gonna rank them.
Oh, yeah. I agree completely.
I can't imagine him not being in the top 7 at the very
Yeah.
least.
Yeah. There's it's funny. We talked about, Die Another Day. You could start naming categories of Bond, like best or song, villain, Bond girl, etc. And Die Another Day would be the question candidate for worst of all those categories. I think Casino Royale, and it's awesome that it's the next movie sequentially, or in terms of chronological release, is almost on the opposite spectrum. I think you could go down. I mean, it wouldn't be as clear cut, but I think you could go down all these categories, especially villain with Lashif, and it would arguably one of the best, the very best. Uh, you know, Vesper Lynn one of, if not the best Bond girl, just because of the tremendous impact that the character has on Bond, but also just and I don't even mean that as far as what happens. I mean just from the very moment they meet, she has an impact on him.
Right.
You see his, laugh kind of in disbelief response to her as she walks away from him in the train after their first conversation. I I immediately buy their relationship. We've talked about other times that there have been other relationships with Bond girls that have been very good in previous Bond films. There have been plenty of others that are not so believable, and this one, from the first moment, you buy it, and it's critical because the whole crux of the movie, the whole story, is with her. And so if you don't believe in her in Bond, the movie would fall apart. And of course, she just does a wonderful job and is, you know, arguably the best Bond girl, or would be in the top seven easily, like the top three, I think. Um, and her chemistry with Daniel Craig is just, second to none. I Like I said, it was going to be really hard for me not to just gush. I try to be fair. I try to point out flaws. Uh, I'm not saying that there's not flaws in this, but I don't really have any to discuss.
There's no movie without any flaws at all.
Right, exactly. But I don't really have anything but positive and very praising things for for Casino Royale. I think that it's only gotten better with time. It hits me just right. We've talked about how you know if we saw just a little more, or a little more of this in Bond or whatever, and I think part of that is was spoiled by this movie. It's been out 15 years, and this style of the character has been around for that long, with Daniel Craig, and I feel like we've been very spoiled by this run of Bond. Um, I'm gonna make another statement later on when we get to Quantum of Solace about what I think of the quality of his movies, but this we talk about every time that a new Bond takes over. It's almost like they usually like come out the gate swinging, but this is just Daniel Craig could have not done another one, and this would still, I would still put it up. They could go have abandoned this reboot and gone back to, Brosnan or something next, or something weird like that, and I would still say this is one of my favorites. Um, or this is
Yeah.
my favorite.
Well, since you said that, Drew, Honor Majesty's Secret Service is worth bringing up for many reasons, but like among the reasons that Honor Majesty's Secret Service is worth bringing up, like if this had been Daniel Craig's only movie, it would still be one of the very best, at the very least, one of the very best Bond movies.
Right.
But also, it has some similar touches, including, I mean, most importantly, with Vesper.
Yes.
Um, and Eva Green is one of my favorite people. Like, she's electric on the screen. Like, I love her in so many different things that she's been a part of. Um, which that's something else in favor of Casino Royale in general. Like, there's so many people that are my favorite people are in this thing. Um, but Eva Green is incredible. But like one of my favorite moments in the entire movie is actually when she gets Bond a suit, and he's looking at himself in the mirror and enjoying it, enjoying the look of having a finely fitted suit.
Right.
And it's very evident in this movie, like he wasn't a proprietor of the finer things before this. Like he's becoming, in the act of becoming the Bond that we know
Right.
in so many ways. And obviously, too, this movie's still very much a Bond movie, but it's nonetheless the act of becoming Bond too. Uh, and when she looks at him and smiles, it's just such a perfect moment about their relationship and the import around it,
Right.
as well as being important in showing Bond becoming Bond. The, their relationship is so pitch perfect.
Right.
And whenever you get to the end and it reveals itself as tragedy, uh, it works partially, or really because of how well built they have been as characters. Not just how strong the relationship is, but just how well built they've been as characters individually. And On Her Majesty's Secret Service is one of the things we talked about in that film. Is like it has these nice grace notes, but how much better it would have been if a lot of that stuff had been integrated better. And Casino Royale is that, but actually working perfectly. Like it actually has these things. And I mean, the only thing it doesn't have, in a certain regard, that On Her Majesty's Secret Service has is a certain absurdity. It doesn't really have the same absurd edges, and touches some of the same touches of humor. Like I can't imagine Daniel Craig in Casino Royale um, pretending to be somebody else in the way that Lazenby is in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Um, that would be pretty weird. Yeah, I do think too much could be made about a lot of films that are so-called dark spins on certain legacies. Like Batman Begins gets that same rep, and I think it's unfair to call it completely dark. It also has a lot of humor and heart, and it's not just dark for the sake of being dark.
Right.
Uh, it's a fun movie in its own right, and the same is true of Casino Royale. It's a very fun movie. That How about that? This isn't quite in the note of fun, but it's like whenever Bond is chasing the kidnapped Vesper, and the car flips, like more times than any car had flipped before, like as a world record. Like Martin Campbell has a way of
Right.
getting world records in his Bond movies.
Yeah.
Uh, he had a world record bungee jump, and has this
Right.
barrel roll. They decided to destroy some expensive cars in Casino Royale uh, by flipping them a whole bunch of times. Uh, but man, it's so intense and has
Yeah.
like it's not. I don't think it'd be fair to call this movie just completely realistic, and that's not to say that it's unrealistic, but it has these extremities that really work well. It definitely plays large and lives large, and that's part of what makes it Bond.
Yeah.
It kind of follows that edge of being realistic, but also still action fantasy
Right.
in a certain respect too. Even though it's worth mentioning, there's very very little CGI in this film,
Yeah.
and I mention that partially because we're going to be talking about Quantum of Solace soon, but also just in general, like it's worth mentioning just how, and also it follows Die Another Day, which was full of really terrible CGI,
Right.
and
Exactly.
on top
Yes.
of other terrible things Die Another Day had, it had terrible CGI, and this one, like I'm not the sort of person who trashes something for having CGI. That's not really the point. Like there are movies filled with CGI that are amazing,
Right.
but at the same time, you have to do what the story demands, and this is a story that is more down to earth and benefits from you believing the action you're seeing on the screen,
Right.
which is tribute to the absolutely incredible stunt team. They're doing some great A plus work. Uh, like everything is on that level in this movie. Writing is sharp, and the writing is not just from uh, Purvis and Wade,
Right.
who, like I said, have been in part of it since World Is Not Enough. But you also have Paul Haggis working on the script, who's a quality screenwriter, who's Oscar award winning
Right.
screenwriter, and made a movie that we could talk about called Crash that won Best Picture. That's often one of the most disparaged Best Picture winners, and I think somewhat unfairly. But nonetheless, Paul Haggis is a quality screenwriter who is brought on, who had just the year prior won the Oscar. And that's something that's incredibly worth bringing up about the Daniel Craig era too, is that the quality of the people that they're bringing on to make these movies is unreal,
Right.
and it's kind of unprecedented because like there are different types of filmmakers. There's like auteur filmmakers, and there's
Right.
more workman-like filmmakers. And I honestly have made the case that both types of filmmakers have value and can make just as great a movie. They're just different types of things. Bond is definitely like a workman-like
Right.
filmmaker territory because they're trying to maintain their franchise. The producers are trying to maintain their franchise. And we have lost directors like Danny Boyle,
Yeah.
uh, who was at one time going to make the next Bond movie we're going to see, which would have been crazy. I don't even know what a Danny Boyle Bond movie would look like, but it apparently was too crazy for what they wanted to maintain.
Right.
And you have like Christopher Nolan has talked about wanting to make Bond, and Spielberg was at one time going to make Bond, and Tarantino wanted to make a Bond movie with Brosnan. And like I yeah, think always thought those things sounded too intense for what Bond has done. But the Craig era has actually brought on some really top flight talent. It's like, oh, we're gonna actually bring on an Oscar winning screenwriter to work on this movie. Like, oh, okay. And in a couple movies on our next episode, we're gonna be talking about that even more so in terms of just the kind of people they're bringing on to make Bond movies. But yeah, it's a interesting change, and also Martin Campbell is basically like the Bond whisperer. Uh, and I wondered, like, man, could they bring him on to reboot Bond again? Like would he
I've
would he do
wondered.
that?
I've wondered the same thing.
Like, are you? I assume you're familiar with the film director David Nutter, who
Yes.
is often called the pilot whisperer, and is has become known in recent years for the Red Wedding episode
Right.
in particular. But his claim to fame has often been directing pilots to TV shows that have become huge successes. And Martin Campbell could almost seem like the Bond whisperer in
Right.
the same spirit that Nutter has been for television series. Um, what a start, though, with Casino Royale. That is a kick in the nuts, so to speak.
Right.
Uh, and yeah, that's kick in the nuts has to be said in terms of Casino Royale. Um,
Right.
that scene though, like people want to talk about the darker edges of Casino Royale. Obviously, it's pretty dark to be in a dank room and be hit in the nuts,
Yeah.
um, tied to a chair and
Right.
bare to nothing. But at the same time, the way that Craig plays it keeps it from going into the complete gutter in terms of being so serious you can't stand it. Craig's performance in that scene is like
Yes.
keeping the grit, but also allowing you to not despair, I guess.
Yeah.
Uh, that's a great tonal balance. This movie has incredible tonal balance. There's just so much to talk about, isn't there, about Casino Royale, and so much that you could gush about. Uh, if I was going to nitpick anything, and this is such a minor something, it's the very end of the opening credit sequence.
Yeah.
And I've never been a huge fan of Craig walking out and coming out of the silhouette being in the shot, but at the same time I get it because they're like, yeah, this is Bond. You know my name. And this guy is Bond, this blonde haired, blue eyed guy
Right.
that you said you didn't like being cast as Bond. He is Bond, guys. Just look at his face, you know? Like I like it as an announcement, but I'm not a huge fan of it for whatever reason as a shot. Um, and that is like the most minor of nitpicks that you can have for this film.
Yeah.
It's about the degree that I'm at because it's a strong 007. You know, it's a great film. It's an exciting film. Uh, it's quite the statement for Daniel Craig and for what they're wanting to do with Bond. It's hard to beat this one.
Right. And I didn't make it clear. I didn't rate it, but I'm sure you'll be shocked to know that I also give this a 007.
What?
As much as I was gushing about it, but I completely agree. It's top shelf Bond. I think um, just a lot of my favorite character moments come from this movie for Bond. Uh, a lot of my favorite things from the franchise come from this movie. So it speaks a lot of about it, and it's just that good. And I knew it was that good when I was about to watch it with my wife the other night. She actually started joining in with me to watch these because she likes Daniel Craig as Bond. She does not particularly care for any other version of James Bond, but she likes Daniel Craig. Um, the I knew how I felt about this movie before I watched it again, but it just feeling so strongly about it after already having seen it. It's one of those movies. Like, not only is this my favorite Bond movie, this is one of my favorite movies. Period. I just like it that much, and it has a strong effect on me every time I see it. And I mean, 007. I mean, we had talked about it before on previous episodes, so I'm sure anyone listening would kind of figure that's what it was going to be, was a unanimous 007, but it's well earned. It's well earned. It's so good.
Well, it also has like the perfect balance of several elements that makes Bond great. You know, like as a series, it has the huge action, epic scope. It has, and also like you mentioned, the cinematography, which is fantastic in here. It's really solid stuff.
Right.
It also knows when to pull back and show you the action, which is really stinking important. And I bring that up again because we're about to talk about Quantum of Solace. But it has that epic action. It has the harder thriller edges at times,
Yeah.
especially in like recalling like our first episode talking about Dr. No from Russia with Love Goldfinger and mentioning, certain qualities that Bond could have,
Right.
um, that is, reminiscent of something like Hitchcock. It has some fun character tropes. It has all this depth and range, as well as just having great action beats and moments.
Right.
Um, yeah, it's what a great film, to say the least. And I think it's pretty evident too. Like not just that we're devoting time to it, but just the way that we've talked about Bond. That to say that like our favorite Bond movies are probably also some of our favorite movies, like uh, yeah, that's very much true.
Right.
I don't know, like I feel like you said that so many things from Casino Royale are the best things in the entire Bond series, and I just want to mention one more time, even though we've already mentioned it, but the "You Know My Name" is such a great song, and Chris Cornell is incredible.
Yeah, I think it's an underrated Bond song too, because there are a lot of, it may not be so as much now, because but when it came out, first couple of years it had been out, I heard a lot of people say they didn't like it that much, or it wasn't their cup of tea or whatever, and I never really understood it. It's a good song. It's a great song. And it fits. It it's a statement. It's a statement of a song,
Yeah,
and it's perfect for this Daniel Craig era. And now you said you got chills when you heard it start up. I kind of did too, and part of it was because Chris Cornell passed away a few years ago. Now, um, the song kind of hits even heavier, and this was the first time I watched it since then.
yeah,
Uh, so it's kind of very very cool edge it has to it now, more so than it already did. But just what a great Bond song, and I guess oh we'll jump into Quantum of Solace.
Are you going to tell us who you work for?
The first thing you should know about us is that we have people everywhere.
I thought I could trust you. You said you weren't motivated by revenge. I think you're so blinded by inconsolable rage that you don't care who you hurt.
You don't have to worry about me.
Quantum of Solace had the ingredients to have a great song with Jack White and Alicia Keys, and I think the song is cool. I don't really have I don't dislike. In fact, I think I liked it more this time I watched it than the first time I watched it, because I was a little disappointed when it first came out. I remember talking to you about it, like was hoping the song would be a little bit better. Uh, but I still enjoy it. Another Way to Die. It's a cool song, and I like the opening. But let's talk about how this is really interesting. This is the one of the most unique beginnings to a Bond film, just like the last one was too, but in a different way.
yeah, very different way.
We pick up with a plot element that we didn't even talk about in Casino Royale, with the character Mr. White, who Bond shoots at the end in the leg. We pick up with immediately following that. This is a direct continuation. You have jokingly referred to this as Casino Royale 1.5, and it is kind of a wrap up film to some of the loose threads from Casino Royale. It is a direct sequel, I guess you could say, and it is, but it also has its own standalone story to a degree in some ways. This is the worst film of the Daniel Craig era, and it's not bad at all, really.
No,
It's not as good. I mean, it's a little different to watch after you watch one of the best. This one's got the quality it does have going for it is the action. Although I'm not a huge fan of the quick takes, quick, fast cuts. We got a lot of those. They're not, and that's not even saying that they're badly done, because they're really not. That's just something with Bond. It's just something I don't like. It's a preference. I like those long takes. I like seeing, everything done in that shot in that traditional way. But they're kind of this is where some of the Bourne comparisons come in. I don't think I still don't completely agree. They're different kinds of movies.
Oh, they definitely are. Yeah.
Yeah, but the style element, I can see somebody talking about that. But taking that out of the equation, the action in this is pretty good. Because we open up in the middle of a car chase, picking up right where the last film left off, and you're just kind of going to be on along for the ride. I think that's the best way to describe Quantum of Solace. You're kind of along for the ride. It doesn't really, not that there aren't any slower moments, but I think it's a movie. If it took a little more time to breathe, it would be a much better movie. But some of the action here is great, and I had forgotten. I didn't forget the sequence, but I had forgotten how much I liked it. And it's the opera scene
Yes.
where we kind of see Quantum for the first time. The secret organization that Mr. White and Dominic Green, the villain of this film, are all working for, and just the way that's done. Usually, in the past with Bond films and secret organizations, it's all about a long table in a boardroom or something, and hey, we'll see that again next episode. Um, but it's that kind of thing. I love the idea of you know this organization going out in public and talking on these little earpieces. It doesn't really make much sense. Like, couldn't they have some secure channel to talk to and just stay at their homes? Did they have to come to this public opera and do it? I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's Bond. I'm willing to accept it on that. But it was a real cool setup, and just the way the sequence plays out, I really enjoyed it. In a lot of ways, this one feels like I feel like the things that are strongest are the connective tissue to Casino Royale. We get a wrap up, a kind of a resolution to where Vesper left Bond, and we find out what was motivating her. It's mentioned in Casino Royale, but we find the truth of it here. The beginning and end of this movie, I feel like, are kind of its strong points. But that's not to say that the story of this movie is terrible or the characters bad, because there are actually things I really enjoy. Um, Dominic Green could be a great villain if he was given a little bit more meat to the story.
You think they should have oiled them up some more?
Yeah, yeah, they could have. They could have. But you know, I think Camille, I think is how they pronounce it. I think she's a really cool Bond girl. Kind of a familiar storyline. She, one of the, that's the one thing. There's kind of randomly too many villains in this. You have Dominic Green, and then you have this kind of um, dictator, South American dictator character who's just kind of, to me, kind of feels tacked on, and he's really rapey. For no real reason other than to be like, yeah, this guy's awful. The writing isn't as finessed as it was in Casino Royale, but you know he murdered Camille's family, and and she also has a past as an agent. I didn't remember that from the last time I had seen it. Bond mentions it in in Quantum of Solace, so that kind of threw me off. I didn't remember that part, but she's on a revenge mission, um, which we've seen that before too. I do think that this is kind of got what works for that kind of revenge story because Bond's on a revenge path of his own, and I think it works pretty well. I do think this is a much better film than like License to Kill, um, or For Your Eyes Only, that played with that kind of storyline. I feel like Bond choosing the way he chooses revenge at the end, kind of the Vesper, uh, her former lover, what he chooses to do and not let go. I love that touch. In other ways, it kind of feel it not disjointed, but it just kind of feels rushed that this other movie is sandwiched in between these other points. And I really enjoy this movie. I'm really, this is another one I think I may end up rounding up on my score, uh, because I felt a little more strongly about it this time. I thought I had seen it more than once, but to be honest with you, I think I had only seen it the one time in the theater, and I think I had only seen bits and pieces uh, since then. So this was really the second time I've seen Quantum of Solace. I'm gonna give it a 006 out of 007, and I kind of told you I'm rounding up, so really it's a 005.5, so it's kind of the low on the 006 side, but it doesn't, that's all for just kind of talking it out. But I wish this one, after watching Casino Royale, I wish that this one was a little bit stronger to kind of be that 1-2 punch to follow it up. But what they do right is done really well. And it's also the action, the stunt work is just also phenomenal and worth mentioning in its own right, that it's kind of top notch once again here. In way, I really like Tomorrow Never Dies, and it was kind of like a lean action movie follow up to a great Bond movie. This one's similar in a way, but it's got a little more to it. But I do have a few problems with it. Uh, and like I said, I think that that general, some of those plot lines, they just kind of feel tacked on, and um, like even the revenge storyline to an extent. Like I feel like if they had given the movie a chance to breathe a little bit better, we could have had something really solid. But as it stands, this one I give it a 006 out of 007, and it is the weakest Daniel Craig movie.
I mentioned back on Die Another Day, the director Lee Tamahori had started out his directorial career um, with the really great smaller film Once Were Warriors, and somehow changed pace quite a bit, you know, and made different sorts of movies, including the worst Bond movie ever. Um,
Yeah,
but he went down this weird, big action path, you know. The director of Quantum of Solace, Mark Forster, is a really interesting filmmaker. One of his uh, earlier films, the film that put him on the map, is Monsters Ball, featuring our favorite Bond girl and Billy Bob Thornton as well. But he's also made a lot of. He made Finding Neverland and Christopher Robin,
right.
really sweeping kind of family films. He made World War Z among his credits. You know,
Yeah,
he brought a lot of his people along to make this Bond film, and that's really interesting take on Bond. You know, going back to that auteur idea of a particular style influencing what Bond is, and sometimes I like it in this movie, and sometimes I'm not such a big fan of it. I don't know. It's got that mixture going on for it of like the opera scene that's utterly fantastic, and I kind of like the opening, but I wish they pulled back a little bit more
Right.
and showed us more of the action because there's some cool action happening. Like, why aren't you showing us the action more?
Right.
Um, at least for moments, and I think that's a lot of my problem with this movie is not that it's a bad movie, but that it doesn't pull back some of its more eccentric parts a little bit more.
Yeah.
Like I like some of its stylistic flourishes. I wish it had stopped a little bit and just
Yeah.
gave us a little bit more traditional, I guess, is a certain way of putting it. Uh, I really like our Bond girl in this and how she's not handled as a love interest,
Right.
Like that's something that is a great touch for this era of Bond. And at the same time, I want to be a little critical of the take on the Bond character, just because, not because Craig is bad, because he's certainly not, but like I mentioned on the Casino Royale, how he's starting to enjoy the finer things a little bit,
Yeah.
and here he makes a decision to like take themselves to a nicer hotel,
Right.
which is a fun bit. I just wish there was more done with it to understand his character and his take on the finer things or not.
Right.
And like that, it's kind of like where I rest, like I said, on a lot of this movie is uh, I don't know that it balances quite as well. Like Casino Royale had this perfect balance of everything, and Quantum of Solace has these interesting notions, and it doesn't completely sell it all.
Right.
Um, it's like this eccentric little odd spin from Casino Royale. I would like to mention that one of the editors on this movie, there's two editors, and one of them, I'm trying to pull back to where his name, Richard Pearson, his credits actually include the Born Supremacy and United 93. So he's worked with Paul Greengrass
Gotcha.
among his credits. Uh, and I don't think that should be too huge of a surprise
Right.
considering some of the editing on this movie. He also recently did Godzilla King of the Monsters and Kong Skull Island.
Uh-huh.
Again, not being such a huge surprise in terms of like choppy, fast action.
Right.
um, and there's different things that could be said about all those movies. Certainly, The Born Supremacy is probably my favorite of the ones I just listed in terms of being a great movie in its own right. Really, it could be worth talking about the Bourne series at some point, just because it's interesting roller coaster all its own, and certainly not Bond, um,
Right.
as we mentioned before. But like Quantum of Solace is the oddball in the Daniel Craig bunch, and I don't want to make too much about it being offbeat from that. It's just I really like Matthew Almeric. I really think he's an interesting Bond villain. Green is a interesting idea for a Bond villain, but I don't like some of the CGI in this movie. I don't like the slightly less realistic touches, I guess, in at points. I don't know. Like you think about the scene at the end when they're all on fire, the whole building's on fire, and it just feels. I don't feel the threat of it too much. I just feel
Right.
like it's all of this a little too exaggerated, I guess, and it doesn't. I don't know. Doesn't really kick you in the same way
Yeah.
that a lot of the action scenes or moments in Casino Royale might. And it's kind of where the movie lands is this little bit unrealistic push, I guess, in the wrong direction. Uh, And at the same time, like I said this at the time too. It's like it's not a bad movie, but I wish, I hope that whatever follows it up is a strong Bond movie in its own right, because then Quantum of Solace can be where it's at, which is this little pocket. you know, it can just be, oh yeah, we just got this other one, and now we go move forward. And Quantum of Solace is just like a addendum. It's a little bonus Bond movie
Yeah,
that they did on the side almost. And it's a weird thing because like it fits in this era of movies that feel like television episodes
yeah,
as opposed to really feeling like a feature film. Instead, it feels like, oh, here's an episode of Bond, and
yeah.
I don't know. That could be for better or for worse because I don't like. I don't want to keep repeating it too often, but it's not a bad movie. I will give it a 005, uh, but it's certainly not a bad movie. It's good. It just has these faults to it that, to me, just kind of hinder it from being a great movie in terms of having all the right mixture of elements, I guess. Because even though I like our Bond girl here, I don't know that it has the same resonance that it should have to really work fully as a story. But it is probably uh, higher on the roster than our other revenge specific ones that we've had before, as you said.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it's the odd man out, but that's not the worst thing
No.
ever.
Like I said earlier, it's like this is the worst so far. I mean, I don't want to speak for No Time to Die yet because it might suck. Uh, but in general, quality has been pretty consistent. This is the worst movie of his run so far. Um, and gave it a 006 and you gave it a 005. So if this is the biggest dip in quality, I think it speaks volumes because, like you said, it's not a bad movie. I agree with you. Like I said, I'm really kind of I decided to round up and give it a stronger uh, rating, but I'm could go the other way too because it does have those pitfalls where, and I agree with you about the style too because I actually love the editing and the cuts during the opera scene, but I'm not so big a fan of it uh, in that huge action scene in the beginning, whether it's just the chase or the shooting with M present, where there's a traitor agent and Bond's having to foot chase him. It's like you know a repeat of the parkour scene from Casino Royale, but it has its own flavor. It's its own thing. It's not exactly a retreat of that, but it's kind of felt like they were holding that to a certain standard, which they should because it's one of the best action sequences of all time, in my opinion. Um, and this isn't nearly as good, but I would have preferred that they like you said pull back a little bit and let us see it. Let us see more of it. But again, like I think that if that's the we've talked about the low points for other bonds have been ranged from kind of mediocre to really bad, extremely bad. So this is a good movie. I think we both agree uh, on that. So it's not bad. It's just kind of a step. I would a step back maybe from Casino Royale, just a touch down. But that downward trend does not continue, and your wish came true that the next one would be a strong one, and it would be viewed, and Quantum would kind of be allowed to be viewed in its little vacuum uh, as its own thing. And our next episode will take us to a very talented director directing two films back to back, Skyfall and Spectre. And I'm looking forward to this because Skyfall was the 50th anniversary Bond film. It came out in 2012, and it's very much of that vein of celebration. Uh, it's a lot of fun to watch. It's a crowd pleaser, um, but it's also very well done. Very good storyline. I know I'm giving it a review right now. I need to shut up. Uh, I haven't watched it for this yet. I need to, but I feel strongly about it, and I'm excited to watch it again. And same with Spectre. I really think highly of it too, and it's a little more of a controversial take that it's really good, I guess, because for some people they view it as a step down or view it as the worst of the Craigs, which I do not at all. I think it's I had it tied for Skyfall. I kind of like them both about the same. Um, it has its flaws. We'll see how I feel when we watch them again. But this is going to be until No Time to Die comes out. This will be the last episode of our Bond series.
This will be our Sam Mendes episode, and I'm a fan of him as a filmmaker. He has quite an interesting filmography.
Yeah.
But one of the traits that's common in his filmography is great picture and sound, and really pushing up that, not just great quality, but just the artistry of that, the art of cinema, so to speak. And I don't think, like we talked about Quantum of Solace's style kind of going kind of too far in some regards in its own way. Um, I don't think we've had any filmmaker in the history of the Bond series that's cared about the art of cinema as much as Sam Mendes. Just the synchronicity of everything, and that's not and talk again, auteur filmmakers versus more workman-like filmmakers. I think each are capable of making just as good of films, but I think that'll be an interesting point of conversation when we talk about Skyfall and Spectre, to talk about
Right.
what that means in terms of the specificity of those movies. Uh, in Spectre in particular, I've only seen it, I think, the one time, and really enjoyed it. I just it'll be good to revisit. Uh, Obviously, revisiting both of the movies
Yeah.
and kind of reassessing them and digging into how they look in terms of comparison to the rest of the Bond series, in comparison to Casino Royale and Craig's legacy.
Right.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun episode, a double feature instead of a triple feature, and uh, the first in a while that's only just one director, because we had another episode that was just a one director. But
Right.
yeah, what an interesting combination though, and also in so many ways the culmination of Craig's run,
Right.
bringing us to a certain fulcrum at the very least. It's going to be a lot to talk about, I think.
Yeah. Definitely. It's kind of a fulfillment of what we've talked about. This is all about seeing Bond become Bond. We're going to see that fulfillment. We're going to see that uh, come to be in these next two films. So it's definitely an episode that I mean, obviously it's been building to it, but like very much in a sense that, this is what we've been building up to, um, in general, is just Bond becoming Bond. And I think it's going to be a great episode. Two really exciting Bond movies with and I'm sure we'll have a lot to say about both.
Undoubtedly, yeah. Especially when it comes to points of comparison too,
Right.
in general across the series. Uh, I'm looking forward to it. Drew, thank you as always.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Jesse.
Stay tuned for next episode. Thanks, everybody.